Hello and welcome to Mostly Vintage Cameras. In 1974, Kodak introduced a new film format which was called 110, and this is a 110 film cartridge. Comes in a sealed foil wrapper, and as you can see it's a drop-in cassette type of film. The film's there, the cassette protects it with some backing paper. On the backing paper are the frame numbers as well. Pretty standard fare. We'll take a closer look at that perhaps a little bit later. But the advent of this format led to a plethora of cameras like this Instamatic 300, which were largely plastic construction, largely plastic lenses, I think this one might be glass, with fixed focus, fixed exposure. And the truth is, to have a film format that produced small negatives and therefore grainy pictures, but did so fairly reliably, would, for a lot of people, be better than the alternative, which is a 35mm camera where they don't load the film correctly and they don't get any pictures at all, or they open the camera back halfway through and so on and so forth. So for a lot of people that weren't keen photographers, 110 and other cartridge formats, 126, APS, disc film, do have some advantages. However, there were some manufacturers, notably Canon, Minolta, Minox, Rollei and Pentax, who produced high quality, high specification 110 cameras. Now the 110 format was originally intended to shoot Kodachrome, so there was a sort of an intention that it be a high quality format. Now Pentax, for their part, were the only company to produce a single lens reflex 110 camera with interchangeable lenses, and they were often sold in kits. So as we can see, it's the Ashai Pentax Auto 110, and it's a kit with a camera, lenses, a flash unit and a winder. So let's open this up and see what we get in the box. Straight away you can see it's quite a swanky box. It's got spot colour gold. It's got a list of contents on the side in very nice text. I might just brighten this picture up slightly. And so when we look inside the box, we get an instruction manual, as you'd expect. Nothing particularly exotic here. This camera incidentally came out in 1978. This particular one I would guess from the printing date of the instruction book is a 1982 flavour one. And this was the first of two versions of this camera. Holding it sideways, I can't quite get it in frame vertically, the whole set, which is ironic when it's such a small camera in its own right. So this is the Auto 110. In 1981 there was a 110 Super that came out and added a few extra features, but we'll perhaps discuss that in a moment. But this was the full set at launch. So we have the camera, a couple of spare lenses or extra lenses, I can reach and get out and get those, a flash unit and a winder. Now somewhere in here I've got a couple of batteries as well. There we go. So there aren't many cameras that come in a satin lined padded box with an satin lined padded insert in a box with a whole set of accessories. So this really was intended to be quite a premium product. The winder, I'll start with this because it's falling apart. The battery cover on these winders was quite bad. The clip was quite weak, and so generally they fall apart and break. That can be good with a bit of sticky tape of course, but for now I'm just going to put that to one side. So let me just reframe this so you can see the camera in more detail. There we go. And the three lenses that were available at launch were this one, the 24mm, and it would be reasonable to say that was sort of equivalent to a 50mm lens on a 35mm camera. This one, which was a 18mm 2.8, and you can probably work out if that's equivalent to a 50 what that's equivalent to. And then there was a sort of portrait lens, this much bigger lens, I mean big relative term of course, the 50mm f2.8. Now you might notice that all of these lenses were f2.8, and there's a reason for that which we'll get to in due course, but for now let's start as always by putting some batteries in. We have to open the film door to put the batteries in. The battery holder is actually inside the film chamber, and you might think that's a bit of a problem if the batteries die halfway through a film, although it's quite unlikely. However, one of the advantages of 110 film is you can actually open the camera back with the film installed. As long as you don't remove it, you won't have any problem, because the cassette itself is designed to seal and to be light tight. So there's a very deep ridge on it. So it's quite a good design in many ways. And I've just lost my battery holder. There it is. So it takes two LR44 or 10L14 batteries, and the battery holder itself on one side has these little flanges. It's actually impossible to get the batteries in the wrong way around. Whichever way around you put this in the camera, it'll be correct. So that goes in there. If we were going to load a film, we take our film, we drop it in there, we close the back, and we simply wind on until these arrows change from arrows to the number 1. We're not going to load a film today. While we have the camera back open, I'd just like to point out, if I can, there's a little pin just down here. I've got something I can point to it with. It's very hard to see, but it's just here, and that can be pressed in. Now, the 110 cassette design allowed for 2 ISO, 2 speeds of film. They had a high speed film and a low speed film, and there's this little plastic spine on the side of the cassette. If this is long enough to push that pin in, the camera is set to the low speed film, the lower ISO film. If the spine is shorter and doesn't push that pin in, then the camera defaults to the high speed film, the higher ISO film. The only thing is, Kodak didn't specify what the high and the low ISO would be. At the time, in the sort of late 70s, early 80s, 110 films were typically 100 or 400 ISO. But as I previously mentioned, Kodachrome 64 was also made in 110 format. And Kodak left it to the manufacturer of the camera to decide how they would calibrate their exposure meters. Now, on a simple camera like this, it doesn't matter. It doesn't have an exposure meter. It doesn't have any kind of automatic exposure setting or any kind of indication of exposure. All you have is weather symbols, and you have to say, oh, it's a sunny day today, so I'll rack it over to the sunny setting. But that doesn't alter the shutter speed. This is just a fixed aperture or a fixed shutter speed camera. So with these sorts of cameras, it really doesn't matter what this spine is doing. With sophisticated cameras like this, and the Canon and the Minox and the Minolta and the Rollei, it does. So, long spine, low ISO. If you take a sharp knife and cut this off, you could default to a higher ISO. Now Pentax, in their wisdom, chose to use 80 ISO and 320 ISO. So 80 was the low speed and 320 was the high speed. Now, given that most films at the time were either 100 or 400, that means that Pentax engineered into the camera a small degree of backlight compensation in every photograph, which was quite a clever thing to do, because there is no other kind of way of influencing the exposure on this. The camera will set the exposure for you. Now, I mentioned that all lenses are f2.8, and you can probably tell there's no aperture ring on them. There's a focus ring, just a manual focus, but no aperture ring. But the aperture is variable. So if I take this lens off by, this is the lens release here, this turns that way, and we can just about see, where's my little pointy pen gone? These sort of right angled metal flanges, they will open and close to form different apertures. So the aperture mechanism is actually in the camera, as is the shutter speed mechanism. What protects the film is just really the mirror. So if you look at the film gate here, there is nothing else there stopping the film from getting fogged. So to put the lens on, we find the red focus index, we find the red dot on the camera, we line the two up and twist the other way. The viewfinder has split image rangefinder focusing. I don't imagine you'll be able to see that on this camera. There is provision for for a screw-in cable release, which is quite nice. Now without a film in, you can wind on twice and the shutter will fire. Wind on is a double stroke wind on, so you're going to wind it on twice. There are two indicator lights in the viewfinder. The green light tells me everything's fine. There is either enough light to not get camera shake without using flash, or if you're using the flash, which screws in here, then the flash is charged and it's ready to fire. The flash unit is, compared to the camera, absolutely huge. And when you also add in the winder, our tiny little compact camera is now not very tiny at all, it's actually quite huge. So by and large I prefer to use it without the flash and without the winder. But as I was saying, there are two lights. Green means either the flash is charged or you don't need flash. Orange or amber means you're likely to get camera shake. And as we can see here, you really should pay attention to that warning. Now this is the Fitzwilliam Museum, well that was the Fitzwilliam Museum in Cambridge, and I went in there and just dashed in through the main doorway and said to the woman behind the reception desk, do you want to take a couple of snaps of the dome? They said, yeah, sure, that's fine. I said, do you mind if I share them on social media and YouTube and that sort of thing? She said, yeah, no problem at all. I said, okay, thank you. So here's a couple of pictures of the dome of the Fitzwilliam Museum. And this I would think counts as a low light type of environment. I'm actually quite pleased with those photographs there. They're quite pleasing. We've looked at changing the lenses. We can put them on for the sake of completeness, let's say. Let's put the 50mm on. Now, I said in 1981 there was a super version, 110 Super, and it did have some actual benefits over and above the standard one. The first of which was it had a self timer, and on the Pentaprism just around about here on the Super you'll see there's a little space for an LED lamp. That's the flashy lamp for the self timer. It also moved the double stroke winding to single stroke, and on the side of the camera just down here there's another little button on the Super which gives you 1.5 stops exposure compensation. Other changes were the comically large, I think this is called a 130p flash unit. Yeah, this is the AF 130p. That was augmented with a smaller 100p flash unit, and the Mark II winder came out with the 110 Super. That had a stronger battery cover and it would do continuous film winding as well. So the Super does have some sort of improvements over it. Now, you've probably seen on YouTube any number of people making videos. It seems to be a bylaw or a covenant or some sort of understanding that if you have any of these Pentax 110 lenses and a YouTube channel, you are obliged to use these on a digital camera. And these lenses do actually lend themselves quite nicely to adapting to Pentax Q cameras, but also micro four thirds cameras. They will just about work on an APS-C digital camera as well, but you may get some vignetting with the 18mm. I'm no different to anybody else. I will be making a video where I'm using these lenses on probably a micro four thirds camera in the fullness of time. But I've got an idea in my mind just to add a little extra functionality to them over simply whacking them on the camera. But that's for the future. For now, let's have a look at some photographs. You might think that having a tiny little camera like this would be great for street photography. But while I was out and about in Cambridge, I can tell you that every time you put this up to your eye, and particularly when you press the button, you get that quite loud shutter noise. People stop and look. They're very curious about what this is and why one might be using it. So I did take a flash picture. Now this it was quite a sunny day, so there's very little need to use flash. But in this little passageway, I thought I'll take a picture of the sign. Flash will be give you an idea of what the flash range is as the wall disappears from the view. About 10 metres in front of me, two young students happened to be walking down the passageway, and of course as soon as the flash fires they turn around and see what's going on, and of course the natural assumption would be this is some weird middle-aged bloke taking pictures of young Cambridge students, because with their backs to me they wouldn't have known that I was just taking a picture of the signpost. Again, as you can see here, when you go out and about with this camera, people do notice. This chap giving me the thumbs up, and if we zoom in on this a little bit, whilst it is a small format, we can see a reasonable amount of detail, even in the crop. And if we go to this picture of one of the university buildings, couldn't tell you which one if I'm honest, you know, it's a nice enough picture. Anybody that took a picture like that on their high days and holidays that wasn't a photographer would probably be quite pleased with it. And again, if we crop in on that, we can see it does retain quite a bit of detail. Now I did try to mix and match the lenses, but in all honesty I got a little bit lost. As far as I can tell, this is the tele, this is the wide, and this is the standard. Because we do have variable focus all the way down to 35 centimeters on this lens, just less than 1.2 feet if you're that way inclined, you can actually we're not limited to just pictures over a couple of meters. We can take closer up pictures, and this picture of a gravestone, don't normally like taking pictures of gravestones, but this is one of my favourite pictures on the roll of film. So I'm just going to run a few more pictures across the screen. While they're running, I shall prattle on a little bit. Things I always forget to say on these videos is if you'd like to support this channel, please like the video. If you've got experience using these cameras, please comment below, and perhaps if you want to see more content like this, not just from me but other YouTubers as well, click the subscribe button and let YouTube know. If you'd like to support the making of these videos in a more tangible way, that's to say if you'd like to give me some money, you can do that through YouTube Super Thanks, buy me a coffee, I think I'm on Ko-Fi in fact, or if you want to make a small donation every month, I would be tremendously grateful, but please don't feel you have to. I do have a Patreon page. Don't like saying all that sort of thing, don't normally mention it, but feel I should because these videos do cost a certain amount of money to make. And it is nice when people like and subscribe, it is nice to know that people are enjoying the content. I should probably mention that whilst this is a good fun camera to use, I do enjoy using these cameras, the lenses are very nicely dampened on the focus, and it's quite a tactile experience. The viewfinder is particularly nice. They have developed a little bit of a cult following, and that has, as is so often the case, driven the price up a little bit. Hopefully you should be able to find one for about £50. £100 is not uncommon, and for a little kit like I've got you might even end up paying £150. In all honesty, it is a little bit of a novelty, so I couldn't recommend it as your only film camera, but it is tremendous fun. If you find one at the right price and you want to give it a go, it is great fun. The only film currently available is from Lomography. This is what they call Tiger. I don't know why they give it silly names, but it's a 200 speed colour negative film. That works pretty well when shot at 80 ISO, which is what it defaults to. They also do a black and white film, and I think they do a false colour film, either red or lilac, I'm not quite sure, if that's something that would interest you. For now, however, this has been the Pentax Auto 110. I hope you found this video useful or interesting, and thank you for watching, I do appreciate it.